get locked and loaded on a Tuesday. Glasses in session, and let's start with a little gridiron glass. We look at the top 25 matchups that we have upcoming week 3 in college football. We'll start with the first game, which could be an interesting one. Noon Eastern time, 11 Central. Oregon Ducks travel to Evanston to take on Northwestern. Oregon right now a 28.5-point favorite, and the total in the game is 50.5. Oregon looked awesome this past Saturday, beating Oklahoma State 69-3. At Northwestern this week, and then Oregon State upcoming, and then Penn State the week after that. So is there a little bit of a look ahead for the Ducks with the rivalry game against Oregon State, and then a massive showdown against Penn State, the whiteout game for the Nittany Lions the week after that? Dante Moore, obviously still a young, inexperienced quarterback. And Oregon, we talked about in the offseason, right? These Big Ten games where these teams have to travel through multiple time zones. Even though Oregon is going to win the game, they're way more talented than Northwestern. Are they going to cover 4 touchdowns on the road? These are those kind of games where Northwestern, I feel like, is going to make it ugly and low scoring and sloppy. It could be a great game to correlate with the side or total. If you like the Ducks, or excuse me, if you like Northwestern, then take them plus the points and also take the under. I don't think Northwestern's going to cover a game like 42-21. They're probably going to cover like 31-7, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I think it's going to be a great game to correlate. If you like Northwestern plus the points, take the under in that one. What about number 12, Clemson, taking on Georgia Tech? Clemson's a 3.5-point favorite. The total in the game is 54.5. This is a real interesting one. Clemson was a 6.5-point favorite on the live line. They were actually, or the look-ahead line, they were a 9.5-point favorite in the summer. They lose the game to LSU, fine. But then it was last week's performance against Troy where they were down 16-0 in the first half, where everybody's starting to sound the alarm bells on Clemson. And is this team maybe a little bit overrated? Cade Klubnik has not looked good at all the first couple weeks. Now they go on the road and take on Georgia Tech, who was one of the teams in the ACC that maybe outside of Clemson we thought could compete, could be one of those teams to meet the Tigers in the ACC championship. I think this is a bad matchup for Georgia Tech, though. Their offense is really difficult to prepare for and go up against, but everything they do is predicated on the ground, especially with their quarterback, Haynes King. And Clemson's defensive line is fantastic, and their run defense is really, really good. I think Georgia Tech's going to have a tough time moving the ball in this game against Clemson's ground attack, right? So I understand why the line is moving, why it is. Clemson is 0-5 against their spread in their last 5 true road openers. They have struggled in this spot. But with that being said, I do think they cover the 3.5. I would probably just take them on the money line. I think they're a good money line parlay piece this week. I think it's too much steam on Georgia Tech, and I think it's a bad matchup for the Yellow Jackets. So I do like Clemson to take care of business this week. What about Wisconsin taking on number 19 Alabama? Bama's a 20.5-point favorite. The total is 46.5. Talked about it yesterday in the Bet Now games. I like the under. This feels like 27-3, 27-7 kind of game to me. I think Wisconsin's going to have a really tough time scoring the ball. Their starting quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr., is still questionable to play this weekend. Even if he plays, I don't really think it makes all that of a difference. Wisconsin, their offense is not built to score points against Bama. Bama struggles with teams that have mobile quarterbacks and run all these type of design runs. Wisconsin doesn't do that. They just want to line up, fullback, I formation, 2 tight ends, and ram it down your throat. You can't really do that against Alabama. I think they're going to have a tough time moving the ball. And defensively, they're always solid. So I think Bama's going to struggle a little bit on offense. I like under 46.5 in that game. Central Michigan and Michigan. Wolverines a 27.5-point favorite. Total in the game is 42.5. I do like Michigan in this game. I like Central Michigan in this game against Michigan. Michigan Sharon Moore, their head coach, is going to be suspended 2 games. He's out this game and next week at Nebraska. Biff Poggi is going to take over. Yes, that is his name, Biff Poggi. It's a bad spot for Michigan. Coming off that monster game against Oklahoma, at Nebraska next week, which kicks off Big Ten play. And all you have sandwiched in between is a home game against the Chippewas, who it's one of these in-state games. It's going to be their Super Bowl. They're going to get up for it. And Central Michigan went on the road in week 1 and beat San Jose State, that a lot of people think could contend in the Mountain West this season. So I think 27.5 is way too much, especially considering Michigan's going to be without their head coach, and it's a bad spot for them, sandwiched in between Oklahoma and Nebraska. I like Central Michigan. A team that has another bad spot this week is Auburn, and they're laying 24.5 at home to South Alabama with the total of 53.5. You look at Auburn, they got Oklahoma and Texas A&M coming up the next 2 weeks on the road. So they're saving it for that game. It's going to be 2 tough games on the road in SEC play. South Alabama just hung with Tulane. They lost 33-31, a very good Tulane team who could end up being the Group of 5 champion. Major Applewhite is the head coach for South Alabama. If you follow college football, you might remember that. Former head coach, former offensive coordinator at some big schools. South Alabama, I think, can keep this game close, but it's really a fate of Auburn with Oklahoma and Texas A&M upcoming. Georgia and Tennessee, love Georgia this week. One of my favorite bets in college this week. Now Georgia's down to -3.5. Did not think it would get this low, but I love Georgia. Again, Georgia has done nothing so far this season that we normally don't see out of a Kirby Smart team. He's now 0-10 against the spread against FCF schools. He's 1-14 against the spread as a 38-point favorite or more against FBS teams. The look-ahead line was Tennessee -7. But because Tennessee has beaten up on a bad Syracuse team in East Tennessee State and Georgia struggled, now all of a sudden this line is down to 3.5. Kirby Smart has beaten Tennessee 8 straight times. They've covered in 6 straight games, 8 of the last 9. They've won 8 straight SEC road openers. Georgia always gets up for these games. They always play Tennessee well, and Josh Heupel usually has no answers for Kirby Smart. I like Georgia -3.5. How about South Florida and Miami? Top 20 matchup. South Florida been an unbelievable season for them so far. Upset Boise State week 1, upset Florida in week 2. Can they do it again in week 3 against Miami? Now, if you guys listened to the show last week, you know I loved Florida. That was one of my favorite bets of the week. And I think people that were on the Gators last week, it's going to be tough for them to go to the well again and bet against South Florida getting this many points. But put yourself in the shoes of South Florida, right? Again, you've had those 2 big upsets against Boise and especially Florida. If you saw some of the videos surfacing after that game, how fired up the players were, the coaches were, how could they not? They just beat Florida in the swamp. Can they regather and get ready for one of the most talented teams in the country? And Miami is not going to be sleepwalking in this game because of what South Florida did to the Gators. Miami beat them in Tampa last year, so the fact that they played South Florida I think is going to help them going into this game. I like Miami -17. Speaking of Florida, they're on the road this week taking on LSU. The Tigers are an 8.5-point favorite. Total in the game is 48.5. Every time in college football, when you have a matchup like this, star-studded matchup, big brands, and a team loses a look-ahead spot, like Florida did, losing outright to South Florida, I'm always going to back Florida in that next game. I don't know if they win this game outright, but I am going to take the Gators +8.5. And LSU's good, man, but are we sure they're as good as we think after what Clemson looked like against Troy last week? Finally, Texas A&M and Notre Dame, top 16 matchup. Notre Dame favored by 7. Total in the game is 49.5. I think this game's going to play very similar to the way Michigan-Oklahoma did. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think Notre Dame's going to win. They're going to be in control the whole game. But that back door is always going to be open for Texas A&M. So I don't want to lay the 7 with Notre Dame. I'd rather just bet them in a money line parlay. I think like Clemson, Notre Dame, very good money line parlay this week, something like that. But I like Notre Dame to win the game. I'd take them on the money line at -275.